Hello, I'm Esther Gido-Yuat. It's Wednesday, May 31st. This is Africa 54. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights says that Uganda's anti-LGBTQ bill violates the constitution and urges the country's judiciary to review it. As intercommunal violence and fighting intensifies in Sudan's western Darfur, witnesses who have escaped the city of Geneina say their hometown is being ripped apart. And in DRC, a homemade innovation commonly known as Chukudus has become the backbone of the local transportation system, worthy of a monument in the city of Goma. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights says Uganda's anti-LGBTQ bill recently signed into law by President Yoweri Museveni violates the Constitution. The UN is urging the country's judiciary to review it. Here's Rachel Faber with more.
The United Nations Human Rights Chief Volker Turk said on Tuesday that Uganda's anti-LGBTQ law appears to violate the Constitution.
It's devastating that this law was signed by the president, and I hope that the judiciary is going to look into it. And I can tell you, if they look at human rights law, their own constitution, they will find it in violation of it.
The proposal signed into law by President Yoweri Museveni is considered one of the harshest in the world and carries the death penalty for what the law calls aggravated homosexuality. Turk did not elaborate on which aspect of the Constitution had been violated. A UN spokesperson later said there was a whole range of violations, including the rights to life, equality, and non-discrimination. Uganda's government rejects the criticism and says it's adhering to the Constitution. Uganda's information minister told Reuters, quote, "We do not consider homosexuality as a constitutional right. It is just a sexual deviation which we do not promote as Ugandans and Africans." Activists in Uganda on Monday filed a complaint against the new law at the Constitutional Court. It's not yet clear if the court will take up the case. Turk also criticized so-called religious groups for stoking the government to pass the legislation.
They want to use the machinery of the state to impose their views, which is utterly unacceptable. Because at the same time, they also ask, when it comes to their own religious freedoms, that the state does not get involved. So there's a contradiction in terms.
Turk also said that each and every aspect of the law would be examined by UN human rights experts.
That was Rachel Faber of Reuters reporting. Sudan's army suspended talks with a rival paramilitary force on Wednesday over a ceasefire and aid access, raising fears the 6-week-old conflict will push the nation deeper into a humanitarian crisis. The General Command of the Armed Forces said in a statement it suspended talks in the Saudi city of Jeddah, accusing the other side of a lack of commitment in implementing any terms of the agreement and a continuous violation of the ceasefire. The negotiations with the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, which began in early May, had produced a declaration of commitment to protect civilians and 2 short-term ceasefire deals, although those deals were repeatedly violated. Residents had reported heavy clashes in southern Khartoum and in Omdurman across the River Nile until late Tuesday. In Sudan's West Darfur state, violence and fighting have intensified in recent days, according to reports. Witnesses who have escaped the city of Geneina say their hometown is being ripped apart. Henry Wilkins reports from Adre, Chad.
It's around 8 a.m. in Adre, Chad, a town on the country's border with Sudan. Chadian citizens are returning from Geneina, the capital of West Darfur state, which some experts say has experienced more intense fighting than Sudan's capital, Khartoum, in recent weeks. One returnee spoke to VOA just after crossing the border from Sudan. She asked to remain anonymous to protect her family's safety.
It started at the beginning of Ramadan. A lot of problems. They burned the houses and killed people too. A lot of them. At first, they were on the outskirts of the city, but then they came to the interior neighborhoods. They robbed the market. They broke everything, especially in stores and markets. They took everything from them.
The returnees say they fled the city under the cover of darkness to avoid being shot. Moments later, horse-drawn carts carrying Sudanese refugees fleeing Geneina arrive. Sudanese refugee Abdul Anasser Abdallah Adam described how much of the city was affected by the fighting.
All of it. Militants burned all the military campsites. Nothing left. Everything was destroyed and robbed. I mean, all the facilities of the city are now destroyed, starting from hospitals, police stations, schools, etc.
Fighting between Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary rapid support forces, which this video purports to show, is tearing the city apart. It's unclear how many people have been killed in Geneina since the fighting began. Since May 19th, the cell phone networks in the city have stopped working altogether, leading many to worry about the fate of relatives and associates still there. Mathilde Vu of the Norwegian Refugee Council say the aid group fears the worst for its colleagues in the city.
West Darfur has seen very high level of violence over this past month. There's been several attacks. There's been complete mayhem basically in the middle of the city, with shelling of residential areas, of snipers targeting people. There's been completely burned down of displacement camps, and a lot of people have had to flee somewhere in the city, but nowhere is actually safe.
The population of Geneina was around 250,000, but tens of thousands have fled to refugee sites in Chad like Barota. Refugees say it's dangerous to leave the city and dangerous to stay. So many people simply don't know what to do. The International Committee of the Red Cross, or ICRC, says the humanitarian situation is dire.
Access to food is getting increasingly difficult. About 3 million people that were there displaced even before the current crisis. So people, they have been through a lot already, and their resilience have been weakened by all these multiple challenges. And now they are facing this new round of violence where they have to flee their homes again.
Many Sudan watchers on social media complain that media attention has focused broadly on fighting in Khartoum, giving less attention to the intense fighting in West Darfur. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Adra, Chad.
Officials in Zimbabwe hope vaccinations will tame a cholera outbreak as citizens continue to drink unsafe water. Authorities are urging people to practice good hygiene in an effort to contain the waterborne disease. Columbus Mavunga reports from Harare.
Zimbabwe Ministry of Health authorities say that cholera has claimed 28 lives since the end of April. Nearly 400 cases have been confirmed and more than 1,400 cases are suspected. Health organizations such as the Zimbabwe Association of Doctors for Human Rights blame the outbreak on the consumption of unsafe drinking water and the flow of sewage in some areas. Jacob Mafume, the mayor of Harare, says he is aware of drinking water and sewage problems.
We are responding to sewage issues as soon as we get a report on them. We are also increasing the water flow. We are also going to take advantage of the polio vaccination to vaccinate against cholera because most of the people who are getting this cholera are unvaccinated people.
Zimbabwe received heavy rains this year and most of its water sources are full. But clean water for drinking and household use is not getting to most citizens' homes because of power cuts and shortages of water treatment chemicals. Fanuel Mushonga says he has not had tap water in his home for 3 weeks. He says He is lucky to have a manual borehole nearby.
If I could get a chance to talk to leadership, I would plead with them to train our students studying to be engineers so that they could pump water from Lake Chivaro to the people in townships, and also to procure water treating chemicals so that people drink safe water.
Citizens should practice good hygiene, and the government should do more to treat water and inform citizens, says Dr. Norman Matara, Secretary General of the Zimbabwe Association of Doctors for Human Rights.
We urge the government to continue the surveillance that they've been doing over the past weeks and over the past months, so that we detect new epicenters of cholera outbreak. We also urge the government to continue with mass media awareness on the cholera outbreak and on ways people can prevent this cholera outbreak within their homes.
The World Health Organization says the extremely virulent disease is now in 13 African countries. Dr. Otim Patrick Ramadan is the World Health Organization's Regional Health Emergency Officer. He says that hygiene is not enough and that governments must provide clean water in hygienic facilities to eliminate the problem.
That is something that requires a lot of investment and that governments need to proactively work on. Then the second one, of course, is also addressing issues of hygiene of food at the community level, at the household level, and then working, because we have communities or areas where cholera has been endemic, and we need to have targeted interventions in those areas.
In 2008 and 2009, a cholera epidemic killed more than 4,000 people in Zimbabwe. According to a US report, the crisis was exacerbated in part by the politicization of water, health, and aid. Columbus Mavunga for VOA News, Harare, Zimbabwe.
South Africa's currency, already under pressure, has plummeted to new lows after a U.S. official accused the country of helping Russia. The plunge is causing concern among officials and investors. But as Zahir Kasim reports from Johannesburg, it's the people who are feeling the impact the hardest.
South Africa is facing a tough and cold winter. The national currency, the rand, has plummeted to new lows against the dollar, while frequent power outages, known locally as load shedding, have further hindered the economy's progress. To counter the weakening currency, the South African Central Bank has raised the interest rates 10 times since November 2021, burdening those in debt with higher payments. Mother of two and Labour lawyer Bettina Fleming says her salary isn't enough to get through the month.
Our bond has gone up 6,000 Rand in the last 18 months with the interest rate hikes. School fees are up, medical aid is up, groceries are up, insurance is up. With the load shedding, insurance is up, but risk coverage is down because load shedding being what it is, insurance won't cover surge charges, so you're probably getting less for your money when it comes to insurance. Fuel is up, car payments are up because of the interest rate again, so there's just no respite.
The situation worsened when US Ambassador Ruben Brigitte accused South Africa of aiding Russia by allowing a Russian ship to dock at the Simonstown naval base in Cape Town last December. The government denies these allegations, but the damage to the rand has already been done.
A scandal like this comes out, and whether or not there's truth to it, I don't know. But the narrative is out there, and you just think to yourself, well, just when we thought there was actually some hope of change, this happens, and the rand tanking is just the signal of another set of problems that we're going to have to deal with.
South Africa has said it wants to remain neutral in the war between Russia and Ukraine, but observers say this really isn't the case and jeopardizes the country's participation in the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which allows duty-free access to the US for South African goods.
The US is 20 times more important than Russia in terms of economic trade with South Africa, and to put 9% of our exports in jeopardy for ideological reasons is a risk.
Experts believe that a change in policy towards Russia and a proper plan to solve load shedding can see the currency return to a stronger position.
If there is a change of tact from the government and there's something implemented like solar electricity is implemented in a way where it assists our energy crisis, and should we show more allegiance to the Western world than to the Russian government, there's a good chance that the rand could recover to where we saw it pre all these fiascos.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced that a delegation of 6 African representatives will travel to Moscow and Kiev next month. Their mission is to engage in discussions aimed at bringing an end to the devastating war that has impacted not only Europe, but also Africa. Ziggy Kassem for VOA News, Johannesburg.
Still to come, a homemade innovation in Goma, DRC, known as Chukudus, becomes the backbone of the local transportation. Stay with us.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, the United States Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, talks about the dire need for humanitarian assistance to the Horn of Africa. Uganda! Uganda! Also, the recently approved anti-homosexuality law in Uganda has activists worried about a domino effect on the continent. Join me, Haiti Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
In other news, almost 3 people were murdered every hour in South Africa during the first 3 months of the year, according to police statistics released on Tuesday. More than 6,000 people were killed in the country, which has one of the world's highest murder rates between January and March, up to 3.4% during the same period last year. Police Minister Becky Cele said the overall situation was improving. In northern Cameroon, unidentified assailants killed 2 customs officers, a policeman and a civilian, in an overnight attack on a security post, according to the mayor and 2 military sources. The attack took place at an entrance to the town of Mora in Cameroon's far north region, about 30 kilometers from the border with Nigeria. Zimbabwe's treasury has announced measures to encourage the use of the local dollar as opposed to the US dollar in a bid to boost the local unit and tame rising consumer inflation. Harare's measures include a directive that all government departments collect fees in the local currency, the introduction of a 1% tax on all foreign payments, and that all customs duty be payable in local currency. The exception will be on luxury goods and where an importer opts to pay in foreign currency. The U.S. House of Representatives is expected to vote Wednesday on legislation to suspend the federal debt ceiling, with less than a week remaining before the government could run out of money to pay its bills. U.S. President Joe Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy are working to rally support for the compromise measure that includes spending cuts demanded by Republicans, with Republicans holding a narrow majority in the House, Democrats holding a narrow Senate majority, and wings of both parties unhappy with the terms of the deal. It is not certain there will be enough support for the bill to pass. The House Rules Committee gave its approval Tuesday in a 7-6 vote that showed some of their discontent as 2 Republicans voted against advancing the legislation. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned last week that Congress must raise the debt limit by June 5th, or else the government will not be able to meet its financial obligations. She said even waiting until the last minute can seriously harm business and consumer confidence and negatively impact the country's credit rating. Some liberal Democratic lawmakers have objected to the deal, saying it cuts too much into social welfare spending, while conservative Republicans have said it trims too little. A Kenyan aid group is using forensic image technology to help parents find their missing children. The Missing Child Kenya Foundation says it has assisted in the location or rescue of more than 1,000 children in Kenya since its founding 7 years ago. Victoria Munga has our story from Nairobi.
Veronica Nyambura recounts the night in April when her 14-year-old daughter Catherine Wangare disappeared from their home in Kenya's Kiambu County. She was on a school break then.
Catherine has said she wanted to go and pick some onions outside and some coriander. Her sister was washing utensils and I was sitting in the room watching news. Then after 30 minutes, that was when our sister noticed Catherine has not come back home. We started looking for her during one of the school trip.
Nyambura says her unceasing effort to find her daughter since then have been futile. Thousands of Kenyan parents like Nyambura are coping with the loss of children who disappeared because of kidnappings, violence, or went missing under other unclear circumstances. According to national data, at least 6,840 children have been reported missing since July of last year.
It is painful. It is traumatizing because we don't know what has happened to your girl. We don't know whether she is alive. You don't know whether she is dead.
This is the brother.
It's a challenge Mariana Munyendo is rising to through her organization Missing Child Kenya. Using forensic image technology, she keeps the search for the children alive by progressing their last known image.
If a child went missing at age of 4, and right now it is 6 years later, they are 10 years old and their physical features, their facial features have changed. And so while the public will have a poster of them then at 4 years old, right now they are 10 years old. So we might be looking out for a different child, a child that is looking different.
The foundation also distributes the image on social media and in communities in the hope that someone will recognize a missing child. Munyendo says her organization has helped locate 1,052 children and reunite them with their families since 2016. 28 others, however, were found dead, while another 151 children who were located were placed in government care. According to the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children, conflicts in countries are causing more children to separate from their parents and increasing the number of missing youngsters.
They'll be going either in search of peace or because most of their family members have become victims. Probably they've been killed in the process, or they're running away with their parents and they get separated.
To further aid the search for missing kids, the Kenyan government has set up helplines and toll-free numbers at the Directorate of Criminal Investigations where people can leave tips about suspicious activity. Such acts, along with the work of groups like Missing Child Kenya, are keeping alive the hopes of parents like Nyambura. Victoria Amunga for VOA News, Nairobi.
Unique to the Democratic Republic of Congo, especially in Goma, a homemade innovation commonly known as Chukudus is the backbone of the local transportation system. The local administration has erected a monument in the heart of Goma in recognition of its cultural significance. Africa 54 technology correspondent Paul Ndiho has this report.
Open on a bustling street in Goma, Eastern DRC, people rush to work. The sounds of cars honking fills the air. Suddenly, a man pushes a wooden cart loaded with goods. These carts are called Chukudus, and they are the backbone of the local transportation system. The technology behind hasn't changed much, but Chukudus continue to symbolize resilience and innovation for the people of Goma, reminding them of their heritage while driving them towards a brighter future. Everywhere you go, you find people using Chukudus to transport goods of any kind, or others using them as a mode of transportation. But right here downtown in Goma, they have erected a statue as a national symbol. The Chukudu monument has become popular with tourists from around the world who admire the intricate woodwork and learn about the history of the Chikudu in the region. As we followed Chikudu drivers on their journey, We met a young man named January Atimana, whose family owns a fleet of Chukudus. He has been driving Chukudus since he was a young boy.
We have a fleet of Chukudus that we rent out. Compared to motorcycles, the prices of Chukudu are very low, and that's why people love them.
Eric Bahata Habyarimana is another avid Chukudu driver.
We don't just love Chukudu. It's a lifestyle and a transportation mode. So instead of staying in camp for the whole day, I transport goods and make some money.
Chukudus have become a source of income for people living in internally displaced persons or IDP camps in Goma. Individuals like Zinamenye Kilimanzira have taken up the craft of making Chukudus from traditional wood, giving them a source of income to support themselves.
My children are going to school and they are eating. Me too. I'm eating, so I can make a little bit of money.
It takes Nzinamenyi 1 to 3 days to build a Chukudu, and this Chukudu lasts up to 3 years.
The reason I make this Chukudu is to have a stream of income to take care of my family.
For now, he says, his fellow drivers and IDP artisans are working together to produce the best Chukudus. Out of curiosity, of course, I could not leave the camp without trying out my luck. But I could barely ride this Chukudu. Paul Ndiho, VOA News.
Oh, Paul, you have to do that again. That's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.